I appreciate that they put recording in progress now. So try, here we are. It's November already. We are continuing through a year. So um uh amazingly, it just
Right? We
seems
made
like
it through 2021 almost.
almost, I know, I
Oh,
just,
wow.
like, yeah, anyway, so here we are. We've all, had our little wounds poked throughout the year. We're coming, but my point was we're coming up on holidays, and I think so many people can get things, poked and hurt and everything else during the holidays. So I'm hoping that those of you joining us have some questions, but I also thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to talk about what can come up and how we can prepare ourselves, and are there things that we can do to make ourselves have a better time as we're going through what typically, I know this one will be a little bit different again, but are there things that we can think of that we can be doing so that as we're going through this, in whatever form of getting together and holidays we have this year, that we're better prepared to do it in a way that we take care of ourselves, but also that we don't make things problematic for other
Mhm.
people. So
It's a beautiful question. Holidays are a wonderful time, but they are also a time that is fraught with our wounds being hit. So I talk a lot about the attachment wounds: loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse. I was speaking, I've had several clients this week who Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah are hard because they've recently lost somebody, either
oh,
because of COVID or other reasons. And so this is their first year where they don't have this person in their life. But even if it's the 50th year that you don't have this person in your life, there were memories and celebrations and things that were special that get triggered when we are around the holidays. So the lost one for many of us could be absolutely triggered. We might have somebody in our family who doesn't say kind things, and so our rejection wound can be hit. We may long to hear from somebody and they're just not available, so a neglect wound or an abandonment wound could be hit. Um, Oftentimes, especially with betrayal trauma, that can also be triggered, because if your partner did something with somebody else at the same time they're doing it with you, that can hit betrayal trauma. Abuse, statistically, abuse tends to go higher during the holiday times because it's stressful. There's a lot of stress and people haven't learned how to manage their stress. So it is an opportunity for our wounds to be hit, and we will react usually in one of two ways. We'll either try to pull away or we can fight. Use that fight or flight response as a way of trying to deal with those wounds. And that doesn't, and that's the natural reaction, fight or flight, because it hurts. We're trying to get away or push people away in order to avoid the pain, but it doesn't actually deal with the pain itself. And so it's an opportunity to practice self-care. It's an opportunity to have some boundaries and practice your boundaries. It's an opportunity to align yourself and connect with people who love you unconditionally and you love them unconditionally, to be aware and to talk and journal and listen to things that uplift you. But it's an opportunity to do some self-care during this time, because we know that the holidays can be a challenge for a lot of people.
I do like, I always think, the best defense or the best offense is a good defense, or whatever it is, the saying. But like, if I know that this is going to be, I'm going to have some opportunities for wounds to get poked, the more I can plan ahead, the more self-care the more I can go, oh, Aunt Lucy is always, she's the one that, like, oh, so what do I need to do to take care of myself? I have lots of friends who go, I do families in moderation. It's like they go, they never, like if it's long ways away, they stay at a hotel, they go do the thing, they leave. So they're doing lots of things. So they're still part of the experience, but they're also not putting themselves in that place where they leave going, oh, that was just horrible. So I think planning ahead of what do you need to do for self-care for you, so that, I mean, my goal is always that I've shown up in a real and authentic way, that I am leaving and I'm not, completely strung out and going, oh, that was horrible, that I haven't caused problems, that I'm doing a whole bunch of things I need to make amends for. So whatever I can do to plan ahead to avoid that, helps me. It helps me. So,
Yeah, I love that. And the other part is being aware of shame, because shame will creep in, the judge, the rebel, the royal, that all creep into, and it will hijack our ability to be authentic and real with people, because we're battling shame. So it's just having some self-awareness. And I love that you are talking about having a game plan and being open, being able to have somebody you can process it with, talk to about it, is also helpful. So
yes. Yeah. And a lot of this stuff is worse in the space between my ears, than it actually is. But sometimes it actually could be so just being prepared, but
right.
so we've got a couple questions. The first one, can you explain the difference between objectification and sexualizing for a sex addict?
So they're actually pretty similar. So objectification basically means that I've turned somebody into an object. And the Arbinger Institute has 3 books that are talk a lot about this. The first one they published was Leadership and Self-Deception. They're actually business books, but the first is Leadership and Self-Deception. The second is The Anatomy of Peace. And then they just barely published their third one, The Outward Mindset. But part of their whole premise is that we can turn people into an object, and then it justifies the way that we treat them. And there's 3 ways that we can turn somebody into an object. One is we can use them as a tool to get what we want. So just like if I'm standing on a ladder to change a light bulb, that's a tool to help me get what I want. And if I'm using somebody like a ladder, like I'm going to use you to try and progress my career, I'm going to use you to try and get what I want, that person has now become an object. It's not an authentic connection. I'm using you basically. And you probably experienced that, somebody using you, and it doesn't feel good. I'll come back around to that. The second way is that we see them as an obstacle in our life. They're in our way, and we just want to push them out of the way. And so we just disregard them. And the third is that they're just irrelevant, like they're a piece of garbage on the side of the road, and we don't even pay attention to them at all. So that's 3 of the ways that we can objectify somebody. And so when we're talking about sexualizing, we've turned that person into a tool to gratify ourselves, oftentimes without authenticity, without connection, without consent, without all the things that would make a healthy sexual relationship work really well. We've objectified them. And then what that does then is that then it justifies, in our mind, it's not really justifying, but in our mind, because now you're an object, how I treat you doesn't matter, because objects don't have feelings. Objects don't have dreams. Objects don't have hopes. Objects don't have pain. Objects don't have wounds. They don't have past. So I can treat you badly, and I don't have to feel guilty about it because you're an object. And that's the challenge that specifically with sex addiction, it does for a lot of porn and hiring prostitutes and those kind of things. Oftentimes in that moment, we're not seeing them as a human being who has a life, who has challenges and hopes and dreams. We're seeing them as that's the person who's gonna make me feel better. So they become a tool. So we can sexualize them as an object. So they kind of go together. Objectification as a sexual tool, but I can also objectify you as someone who's going to help me promote my career. I can objectify you as someone who's going to make me look really good in front of all these people. So it's, if that makes sense, but that's kind of, they merge together a little bit. But the whole thing is, I'm using you for my well-being and I'm disregarding your humanity.
Yeah, and we talk often, I mean, because sex addicts, other people too, but obviously with what we're doing, sex addicts, porn addicts, it's very much body parts, and and so it removes the humanity of that person, that they're no longer a male, female, son, daughter, whatever. There's no humanity for them. They are body parts for my gratification, and that's all. So to start turning that around, it is recognizing the humanity, so that we see people as a complete person and not just those body parts, or just to be here to serve me,
Mm.
and unfortunately, like, while it hits the dopamine and all that for a sex addict, it is still keeping people pushed away, because you can't be, you don't have a relationship with an object. So you're not in a relationship, you're not connecting in any kind of meaningful way with something that you've turned into an object.
Right. And the interesting thing about that is the behavior, I can do the exact same behavior and see you as a human, or I can see you as an object. So I can give you a compliment as a human, or I can give you a compliment as an object. I can, usually I wouldn't put you down as a human, but I can hold boundaries and say that's not okay with a human, and I can also do that with an object. So it's the behavior doesn't really change, but the feeling behind it absolutely changes. And if you've ever been objectified in any kind of way, disregarded like a piece of trash, or seen as a tool that you can be used, it doesn't feel good. But when somebody authentically is giving you a compliment because they see you as a human, oh, that feels so amazing. But when they say, hey, you look really nice today, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what do you want? That doesn't feel good.
So somebody followed up with what, and we'll get to the other question too, but what about the addict objectifying the partner?
So it's the same thing. So in that moment, the addict and the partner can also do that with the addict as well. We can objectify each other. We are not seeing you as a human. So you're a barrier to my happiness. You've just like you are getting in the way, or you don't matter. I can objectify you that way. I can also objectify you as a tool. You are here and you're going to have sex with me and all the things, and that doesn't feel good for the other person when you're objectifying. So we can do that whether it's a stranger on a screen or in our very own home. Like, I can objectify my kids. They can be tools really easy. Hey, go mow the lawn. Like, I can do that. Or I can see that as a relationship that I'm trying to build, because I want my children to grow and learn and have tools because they're human, and I want them to be law-abiding, society promoting, benefiting humans. Or I could just see them as an object. So we can do that in our own homes, and that's the beauty of the work of the Arbiter Institute, is just how destructive it can be in our relationships when we don't see each other as human, who have thoughts, fears, hopes, dreams, and we don't see any of that. We disregard it, and it's all about me in that moment.
That's a really interesting, talking about kids too, because I see the pattern of, I want my children to do well in whatever endeavor, whether it's a sporting event or dance or whatever it is. I want them to be good, because that's a good reflection on me, that they're making me look good. And it isn't about what the child is doing or learning, and supporting them for their interests and how it helps them grow. It's about look, my kids are so successful in whatever it is. So, and I think like you're talking about with the spouse and partners too, that it's really easy to look at them as, oh, well, he or she looks good on my arm, or the spouse is very successful in their career. So it's more about the image. And I'm using that again, it's not about what the relationship is with us. It's more about how they make me look and feel. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, next question. Learning from the past, is it possible to build resilience and make this holiday better than ever and being more connected? Yes, but
Well, I really hope so.
yeah.
But I love my job because I have hope for humanity. I have hope for my clients and that things will get better. I just came back from a training that I learned a little bit more about trauma and its resilience. And when we're traumatized, when our wounds are really raw, our ability to tolerate pain is pretty small. It's pretty small. And then what we do in therapy and different exercises, part of what I learned there was like being able to build a space to be able to move within that space. So what that does is we slowly build the space. The pain is still there, but we've now built a little bit more space in order to be able to move. And what that does for our nervous system is that it gives our nervous system some ability to breathe, gives it an ability to move. And then we continue to expand the space. So in that space, then the wounds, the pain doesn't feel so big, because like if you're cramped in a little tiny box, everything's like, oh, I can't get out. But as we start to build and build, oh, it feels free. I can move. And so being able to do that around the holidays, learning, hey, I did some stuff in the past that didn't work out very well. I'm not going to do that this time. That's creating some space, and we're going to try it a little bit differently this time. And I'm going to work hard on not taking things as personally this year. I'm going to remember to remind myself that I'm worthy of love and belonging, even if grandma over there is telling me that I eat horribly. Like I'm gonna be able to develop some space so that there's like a buffer zone, so that when people act like humans sometimes, and I will be able to do that. And in that space, I can then invite people in, the people I want in to that space. If I'm cramped up in this little box, there's no room for really a lot of connection going on. But as I expand the space, I can invite people in, and they can invite me in, and as you said, that be more connected.
Well, and I like that you said I can try different things, and you know what? Sometimes the things I try work great. Sometimes they're like, meh, but that I'll learn, and next year at the holidays, I can try some other things using what I've learned, which goes to your point about resiliency. Dr. David did a webinar on resiliency, and I always thought you were either resilient or you weren't. And he was like, no, it's like going to the gym. You can build those muscles. You can learn. You can create more space, like you're talking about, and I was like, oh, I mean, to me, that's very hopeful, because otherwise it's, very black and white. I'm resilient or I'm not. And, if I'm not, I have no hope, but then, oh, I have a little bit, and I can make it stronger, and I can learn, and I can do the things that I need to do to get supported. And I can call the people that I need to do that can help support me, and to move through that particular moment, so that I go, okay, now I've survived that one, I can do the next one. Somebody added, someone said the pain is inevitable, the suffer is optional. And I think that that's mostly true. I think, things get poked, and so recognizing that hurts, it really is real. I don't want to just put the pain on a shelf, because that always, pressure cooks out, and that doesn't help me either. So
right.
but I don't have to stay in the pain. I can do things that help me move through it. So the next question. So when the addict uses the partner as a tool sexually, she can get abstinent from acting out behaviors. That's objectification. So what I'm reading, Troy, is they're having sex, but the addict is still objectifying in fantasy, whatever. So I used this the other day on a webinar. I said, so the partner is the vessel, like you're just there. And Rob said, I forgot what he said, but it was kind of like, I forgot what he said now. I should have remembered it. But yeah, I was like, anyway, so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as a vessel, like you're an object, right?
Yeah.
You're an object. So as I'm reading that question, there's a question about the abstinence
Right.
from acting out behaviors, and maybe asking what you're defining sobriety is, inner circle, all that stuff, and that it really is an individual person's thing, with getting some help with a therapist who can help really identify what's in the inner circle, middle circle, those kind of things. The bottom line is that we are sexual beings. And when we can actually be open and honest and real and tender and kind and see each other as human, you're going to have a much better sexual experience than if you are seeing one or the other person as an object. If you're feeling like you're the object, that just is cold, and it just doesn't feel good. And wounds get created in that environment, wounds of rejection, wounds of betrayal, wounds of neglect, and that exacerbates those. And then shame can come in, and it can really create disconnection, which is not what we're trying to achieve at all. So objectification can absolutely show up in the bedroom, in intimacy. Well, it's not intimacy.
It's intimacy.
In the sexual act. In the sexual act, it absolutely can. And part of that is being able to have an open and honest conversation with how that feels when I am not being seen as human.
And if you are having sex, and I'm just going to use he and she. So if you are the female having sex with the male to keep him from acting out, that doesn't work. That's not how recovery works. Then it's a control factor. Dr. Rob always says, why would you want to have sex with somebody you don't trust? So I don't know what his real, and I'm saying he and she, but it could be either way, but what the real plan for inner circle work is. And if he's at the very beginning of this journey, we have a Sex Addiction 101 work group starting next week, and you'll have a 3-circle plan. You'll have some information. You'll have a good starting place, with that. But if you're the betrayed partner, which is what I'm reading, having safe boundaries for you is what I would encourage you to do. And I know partners, it's really easy to go, well, if I have sex with him, then he won't go do that. And that doesn't guarantee anything. So I am an SA sober for 20 months, yay, without relapse. I am finally starting to understand that doing the work doesn't mean just going to meetings and not acting out. Thank you. I have the hardest time managing my emotions as my wife separated for 20 months, floods, asks questions, attempts to make sense of my destructive behaviors. What are 2 or 3 key things that I can do to not get lost in my emotions and play the victim? I am tired of hurting her and my children. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for your vulnerability here. So what's really interesting is that the philosophy that I use, I talk about attachment wounds all the time, that your acting out was really an attempt to soothe and cope with and deal with the wounds of rejection, abandonment, neglect, abuse, all those things. And so you found a drug of choice, in this case, sex. Other people find other drugs of choice that numbed all of that for a while. And then you did the amazing step of becoming sober, what you did is you took away your numbing tool. And so it's like when the anesthesia wears off after surgery. You have knee surgery, and during the surgery, you don't feel anything. It's amazing. It's great. And then a couple of days after, you're still on the morphine drip and everything's fine. But a couple of days after that, they take you off that. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it hurts and got to do physical therapy and it's painful. And that's really what tends to happen for a lot of people. We've taken away your primary numbing tool, and now all the stuff that was underneath all of that is now coming up. And because we've been numbing for so long, we didn't really have tools to actually manage the emotion and the pain very well. So we can become very angry and rageful and all the things. And you said you're tired of hurting your wife and your children. And that's part of what happens when we've taken away the numbing. So you asked a beautiful question of what can I do to not get lost in your emotions. The Finding Peace workbook that I have, shameless plug, but sorry.
No, it's a great resource. It's not a shameless plug. These are resources.
The language that I used in the Finding Peace workbook helps you put language around what's going on. So, oh, my rejection wound is getting stirred up right now, and it's activating some core beliefs inside of me that maybe I'm powerless. There's nothing I can do. I'm a bad person. I can't trust anybody. And I'm able to recognize, oh, those core beliefs are out again. And then I start to recognize, no wonder why I'm feeling angry. No wonder why I'm sad. Oh, I am afraid. And we name it. We say what it is that we're feeling. Mr. Rogers, one of my heroes, says what is mentionable is manageable. So for so many years, we were numbing and shoving those emotions down. So say it. I'm angry right now. I'm sad right now. I'm scared right now. And then when we do that, it helps put the shame away a little bit, because if we don't do that, shame's going to show up and it's going to beat you upside the head and tell you that you're a horrible father, you're a horrible husband, you can't do anything right. Why are you even trying? It's just horrible. And then that's just rejection and abandonment and neglect all over again. And we're going to go right back into our numbing. So naming what you're feeling, journaling is a really, really great way of doing that. Download any of the meditation apps that are around. Calm, Headspace, Stop, Think and Breathe, Insight Timer. There's like a million of them out there. Download one of them. Listen to a meditation. Meditation does amazing things to rewire our brain. And so try it for 5 minutes every day and see what happens. I can tell you that when I started meditating, I became a kinder person. Why? Well, nobody knows. The neuroscience, when they watch what happens to a person's brain, it's like aligning. Things are in place and I'm more tolerant. So I'm learning how to manage and rewire this prefrontal cortex of mine that was kind of messed up over all the years of acting out on things. So journal, talk about it, sing a song, dance to some music, do something to play, find enjoyment, call a friend. Like there's a million things that you can do, but identify, being mindful that, oh, man, my rejection wound's getting stirred up. I'm getting fired up. Okay, what am I going to do? So those are some thoughts.
Well, and I agree with that. But the naming it, what I'm curious about is, are these coming at you at, any given moment, or do you have a structured time? And here's why I think it's really great to have structured time, because then you can call your sponsor before, you can call your sponsor after. You have a manageable time, 20, 30 minutes max of here's when we're going to talk about where we're at. And I will answer your questions. Hopefully these are not disclosure type questions. Hopefully you're both working with qualified professionals, to help. Hopefully your wife is, doing some codependent aligned work and support. But if it's a 20 to 30 minute, and this is when we talk about our relationship, this is when we, do this, that's manageable too. You can do some mindfulness, you can do the things that you need to do to be ready. I think the reflecting back, what I hear you asking in this is, so you're paying attention. And if you're mindful of paying attention to what she's saying, or, I see that this is very distressing for you. Can you tell me more? And that gives her a place to continue, elaborating on whatever it is. But here's the challenging, I kind of almost laughed because she's trying to make sense of my destructive behaviors. People that aren't addicts, like it, I don't know how you ever make sense of how our brains think. They think differently. And if she can get to that, you were somebody who really struggled with some brokenness, and that you were doing the best you could, and like the maladaptive coping mechanisms, I use that all the time. So like what Troy was just talking about too, it's like you were using all of these other things to not feel, the emotions and have to deal with them. So now you're trying to, grow up and do things in a different way, but you don't have all of those pieces put together. It's not like, oh, I quit doing the acting out behavior and now I'm going to be, a complete human being and be able to navigate all that. It doesn't work that way. But it's really challenging for partners who don't think like us to figure out, why would you do it? It's crazy looking from anybody looking at it on the outside. So it will be challenging for her to ever make sense of it. Her acceptance of the brokenness that you've struggled with, that you're working on recovery, that you're working to become a trustworthy person, that's where the beauty of recovery and growing forward, really is. So hopefully, but I'm really proud of you. 20 months, and you are doing exactly. I talk about this all the time because people, do think, oh, he's doing this or whatever, and he's going to be all better. But 20 months, it's a 12 to 24 month period where people start really kind of, settling into that, and then you can really start moving into recovery. So good job, hang in there, one day at a time. What do you see as the biggest obstacle to overcome when you are dealing with recovering SA who has an avoidant dismissive attachment style? And I'd like you to elaborate on that a little bit too. And a spouse who has an anxious attachment style. Both of us are trying hard in our marriage, but our attachment wounds are deep, and conflict can be intense at times. Most of this stems from the SA's childhood trauma and fears of rejection, but some also from the spouse's childhood wounds and fear of abandonment. One withdraws and the other one pushes. It can be a nightmare. And I honor you for asking the question too. So, but you're asking the right guy.
So avoidant attachment style or dismissive attachment style is a person pulls away in order to try and cope with how they're feeling. And so they don't share, they're not usually open. They keep their walls up in order to protect themselves. So that's typically what an avoidant attachment style looks like. I'm pulling away. And an anxious attachment style is, please don't leave me. There's obviously the word anxious is in there. I'm very worried that you're going to leave me. Please don't leave me. And so they can be clingy, very like they're usually the pursuer. They're going after the person, and then the avoidant is backing up, and the anxious is like, but come on, I need you to come closer, and they're backing up. And so yeah, I would imagine that is a nightmare. You're asking what's the biggest obstacle to overcome that? There are two elements to get out of that cycle, and both of them are obstacles for people. The first is empathy. Being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and to identify what their wound is and what they are feeling. When a person can actually step into empathy and not just cognitively like comprehend, but hear in their heart, comprehend what the wound is like for that person and what's going on in their mind, and being able to have empathy for that, it often will allow our hearts to soften. And that's probably the hardest part of that whole thing, is how to do that, especially when I'm hurting. There's the avoidant attachment style person is going to have a really hard time with that, because it's going to require that person to experience emotion. And the interesting thing about empathy is I have to be able to identify what I'm feeling in order to be able to express empathy. And there's an exercise that I do in my Finding Peace in Relationships course, that the couple thinks of a conflict that they've had recently, and then the partners have to try and write down as many of the emotions that they can come up with. And the avoidant personalities, avoidant, not personality disorder, avoidant attachment style, they really struggle. They maybe will come up with 2 or 3 emotions. On the other side, they got like 10 going on. And because they don't have words to describe what it is that they're feeling, it makes it harder for them to have empathy. So the higher your vocabulary is around emotion, the more empathetic you can be. So that's barrier number 1. Barrier number 2 is owning your stuff. We oftentimes will want to blame or protest or escape or rescue in an attempt to deal with what we're feeling, and hoping that that will make it better. And that never works. I call those the burpees: blame, rescue, protest, and escape. Those burpees never work. And so I have to own what I'm doing. I'm moving this way to try and cope with how I'm feeling. And this is Sue Johnson's work from Emotionally Focused Couples Therapy. I'm moving this way to cope with how I'm feeling. I'm doing it in hopes that you will do this. And that's me owning what I'm doing and sharing with the other person that's what I'm doing. But those two are hard. Those 2 obstacles can be really hard. If you got a lot of shame going on, it's shame will hijack empathy every time, and shame will hijack our ability to own what we're doing too, because we're afraid to admit that, hey, I was doing things that probably were less effective in working through this. So if both partners can own their stuff and have empathy for the other person with compassion, that will break down that death spiral that they get caught in almost immediately. But that it takes a lot of work. Those are the obstacles of doing it. In order to really like set up your mindset to be able to do that, it's why do I want to get out of this spiral? Because it sucks, for one, but also because I actually look at you and you're a human being that I care about and I love, and I don't want to hurt you anymore. And I don't want to hurt me anymore. So if the desire is compassion, and I really want us to figure this out, that increases our willingness to maybe lean into owning our stuff and leaning into empathy when that's challenging.
That's all great stuff, but it takes, it's challenging for both of them, because that will be going against their natural inclination. So
yeah, I mean, when we're wounded,
but it's not working. So yeah, so I hope they choose to.
Yeah, when we're wounded, we're going to go into self-protection. When we're wounded, we're going to go into don't leave me. And it's a part of it's being grounded and breathing into, and then what I said.
Okay. So next question. I'm a betrayed partner 3 years from D-Day, currently separated and starting the divorce process. The last 3 years were filled with trickle disclosures, fake recoveries, and relapses, as he never made it past 90 days of sobriety. 6 months ago, I finally held my boundary that I would not stay married to an active addict, so I told him we were done. However, after we split, he decided to get into recovery. He's been sober for a few months now, but is not trying to reconcile the marriage. I'm so hurt because I don't understand why he wouldn't fight for our marriage and get into recovery while we were together, but he's doing it now that we're on the road to divorce.
I'm really sad with you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know him, so I can't say what's going on. It is a pattern not necessarily about sex addiction, but it is a pattern that I see often as I'm working with couples. The one partner will beg and plead and hope and ask and say, we need to go to couples, we need to get better, and the other partner just don't. And then finally, when the partner has got to a place where they're like, I cannot do this anymore, it's like, I'm done, then all of a sudden the other partner's like, really? Oh, okay, well, let me do it then. And oftentimes by that time it's too late for the other partner. That's kind of what the pattern is. I'm saying, obviously there's individual differences. Your courage to be able to have some boundaries and say, this is something that I cannot live with in my life, had to have been one of the hardest decisions that you probably had to make in your life. Your courage to do that prompted your partner to finally see that this is not going to go well for him if he doesn't change. That still stings though, because you're seeing him start to do recovery, but it also sounds like from what you're saying, he's not necessarily interested in repairing the relationship. And there's sadness about that. That's a lost wound right there. And so you're going to be going through the grieving process. You're going to be in the angry phase because it doesn't make any sense, in the bartering phase. And I'm not trying to give false hope. I've seen relationships do all kinds of things where they come back together. I've seen marriages end in divorce. People get married to new partners. They eventually get divorced and they get married back to their original partner. Like, there's so many possibilities of that, how that can go. And I don't know what that will happen for you. What I'm hoping that you can do is that, number one, you realize that you are worthy of love and belonging, that his behaviors and what he did, or his unwillingness to work on recovery, or now his willingness to work on recovery, is not a reflection of you or your worth or how much you matter on this planet, because your worth is unfathomable. And if you can connect with that and know that you are enough, I know that that's challenging sometimes, but that you can separate his behavior from your stuff and be able to lean into your worth, you're gonna still feel sad. You're still gonna be experiencing a loss wound. It's still gonna feel like betrayal still. But from that place of worthiness, you will be able to do what you need to do to help heal that wound for you and help you be the best you can be, regardless of what he is doing or not doing. But I want to acknowledge the sadness. I sense the sadness, and I just want to honor that it's sad. And I don't know why he's doing what he's doing, but you are enough.
So yeah, and like the grieving, I'm absolutely. But I also caught, like, he's still in that first few months. He's only made it to 90 days. So I hope this is genuine this time. I hope he really is, gravitating towards that. And like Troy said, I know people that have gotten divorced and remarried. I also know people that have gone down the divorce process, which is a process. And, they've recognized that they want to stay together and be on this journey together, eyes wide open of what it is. So, regardless, I don't know what the future holds for each of you, but identifying the grief, just processing the grief and loss and all of that, and why he couldn't lean into the relationship. Addiction sucks. I mean, the recovery is awesome. Addiction sucks, and I hate the pain that this causes you. I hate that it's pulling him away. That he can't show up for you, and all of those things as well. But the unfathomable, I can't even say it, worth. I agree with 100%. His behavior does not diminish your worth and value. So next question. So at what point and when do you know he's not objectifying when he has sex with spouse?
Well, I don't know if you part of it, I think, is a felt sense. When you're in tune, you can tell when you're being objectified and when it's sincere. But that doesn't, I mean, that's a like more intuitive. And so sometimes you just can't. So you may not know. So that's where the open dialogue and having some open communication is going on, and looking at each other in the eye and spending some time being present with each other and being open is how you work through that. But I mean, and unless you are psychic powers, you may not actually know whether your partner is objectifying you or not. I also know, in working with lots and lots of women, that y'all have this amazing sixth sense that, I don't know where y'all get it, but you have a sixth sense. And over the course of the addiction process, sometimes you are trained not to trust that sixth sense because of the gaslighting and everything that your partner does. What I really want the women to learn how to do is trust it, because 99% of the time it's right. And so trust it. And so if it feels like, hey, I'm not sure that you are fully present with me, I'm feeling kind of like I'm just a body, talk about it. Talk about what it's feeling like for you. Ask what you need. What do you need in that moment, so that you don't feel so much like you're an object? Whether he is or isn't, you can talk about it and say, this is what I need, so in order to know that you're fully present with me and you see me as a whole person.
And Dr. Rob has talked about this a lot too. And, and sensate focused, like take the focus off of intercourse, of having an orgasm. Like it is about, being in connection, touching the other person. Addicts are, and this is a generalization, so this is not all addicts, but it's really easy to have euphoric recall, to have that fantasy recall. So if they've been watching porn, if they've been living in that fantasy space. And so unfortunately, yeah, it can, particularly early on, transfer over to, sex with partners, but they can learn to be fully present. They can be in the moment, so it can be different. But I think what Troy said about trust your judgment, trust your intuition. Like if you're feeling like an object, you're feeling like an object. So, okay, next question. I am a betrayed partner going through a divorce after 40 years. I have no family. Sons live out of state, struggling terribly in grief, and seeing holidays around me feels how much more alone I am. How can I get through this without going down the rabbit hole? I'm so sorry for you. But I'm glad you're asking the question too.
As I was reading your question, I'm thinking, how do I answer that? Because there's so much grieving that's going on, and there's sadness. There was a song, I don't remember even who wrote it, but it was called Wanted. I'm not going to sing it for you today because there's not enough time. But it's one of my favorite Christmas songs. And it's about this old man who puts a ad in the paid in the newspaper back in the day, saying he wanted a family for Christmas. Is there anybody? He'll bring the turkey. He just wants to be able to spend some time with someone. And so make you cry. But the part of that is you're recognizing this is going to be hard. My sons are out of town. I'm going through a divorce. Who do you have in your tribe that you can reach out to? Can you invite yourself over to somebody's house for Thanksgiving or Christmas? I know our shame says don't do that, but can you? Can you do something different? Like, can you go down to the mission and volunteer on Thanksgiving and do something to serve someone else? I found that serving others is a really beautiful way of me getting out of my own shame and my own, like when my attachment wounds are really activated, I'm very selfish. it's just all about me. And I'm not saying that for you, but I know for me, I can be really selfish. And so doing something for somebody else in those painful moments can actually be really a beautiful experience. It softens my heart. It helps me see someone else's suffering. It helps me see their humanity. So that might be a thing. Looking for if there's any like community groups that are doing things, joining a choir, like there's like holiday choirs going on, like finding something that maybe that's outside of your comfort zone, but helps you start to build connection. Because what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of isolation, and isolation exacerbates the wounds and the loneliness big time. So reminding yourself that you are worthy of love, you're worthy of connection, and what can you do to reach out and build some of that? I tell you, that's one of the hardest things for me to do. So I know that's hard, and yet every time I do, I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. So I was like, okay, I just I live in Arizona. I got cold before this, and I live in Arizona. And I was just in Minnesota seeing, kids and grandkids. And so, like, they're out of state. Can you go visit them? But I love the idea of there are so many other people in our community. In my neighborhood, we have this next door, app thing. I mean, there's plenty of people that are alone, and how can I do something with them? And it doesn't have to be the same. It can be different, and it can be I'm starting something new and different. But I love how can I connect with other people? How can I be intentional about it? I don't want to be a victim of this. I'm going to choose to have a good holiday. It'll be different. It'll be a little but I don't have to uh, feeling the loss, absolutely, but are there ways that you can be of service, be connected to other people in a meaningful way? There's lots of people who are shut-ins, for lack of a better word, and can going around and visiting them in a COVID safe way. I mean, what can you do to when I was early in recovery, and I hated this, I'm going to be real honest. But I was in a meeting and someone said, this, you're a real small package when you're all wrapped up in yourself. And I can't remember now if they were saying it directly at me, but it sure felt like that. And so I finally figured out what they meant, but it was really, if I'm all just, sitting there feeling sorry for myself, I am not open to other people. I'm not connected with other people. I'm feeling sorry for myself or whatever. So it was, like I said, one I hated, but it was really good for me to remember, I want to be, I want to be able to help other people and do so in a meaningful way. So I have to, be intentional about getting out of myself. So, like I said, didn't like it at the moment. Okay. One last question. As the essay, it seems more honest. The more honest I am with my wife, the more hurt and upset she is with me. It is very difficult to not go back to old behaviors and try to mask my true feelings. It feels as though the more honest I get, the further apart we get. Is this normal? And how do I combat and try to close the relationship gap? So what I'm concerned about is that it's disclosure type things, or she's asking you what you're thinking and so it depends. Oh, and I'm interrupting Troy, but like there's an addict healthy boundary next week, Wednesday. Gavin Sharp will be doing addicts healthy boundaries. I highly encourage you. I mean, because it is about honesty, but it's also honesty with safety boundaries for each and both of you. It's like you each have your own support. It isn't that you guys, are like, what I'm concerned about is she's trying to understand. So she's asking the 150 questions and you're giving her those, gory details that she doesn't like in a non-professional therapeutic way. So I'm sorry, Troy, what are your thoughts?
Oh, that's exactly where I was going. There's a way to have integrity without vomiting all over your partner. So there's a way to be honest and open, and still be able to restore trust. But your question was, is this normal? Yes, it's absolutely normal because y'all have never done this before. There's been a lot of freaking secrets as an addict, and so now you're learning how to be honest and trying to figure out how to temper it with compassion and not just like bleh, at the same time. And your spouse is not used to you being open and honest either, so it is a challenge. So that's why we often recommend that you find a counselor who can help you with some couples counseling to work through some of this way of what does this new life look like where you're actually able to be open and honest with each other, and how much information needs to be shared and what doesn't need to be shared and still can maintain integrity. And so oftentimes having a coach or a therapist who can walk you through that might be very helpful.
Yeah, but do check out the webinar next week, Wednesday as well. So Gavin's only doing it, it's a one-time thing. It'll be great. So, okay. Regarding the anxious avoidant attachment styles, what if the addict alternates between those two styles? What can the partner do? I should finish that. I got stuck on the anxious avoidant. So interesting.
So I'm an anxious avoidant attachment style. So
Well, that's what I was thinking, because I always thought it was anxious avoidant. So isn't that the name
well,
of
you can be anxious or avoidant,
Oh,
or me.
you can
I'm
be both.
So I'm super fun at parties. Yes. So that creates crazy making for the partner, because sometimes I was super clingy, like don't leave me, and then other times I'm like, So
Yeah.
what can the partner do? Join a support group.
Yeah.
Reach out to other people so that you don't feel alone in this, because the person who's the anxious avoidant really has to own their stuff and figure out like, okay, these are very much part of my wounds and I'm reacting this way to try and cope with how I'm feeling, and I can see how much it's making you crazy, so I got to work on me so I don't make you crazy. But the partner, really, we have several support groups for partners at Seeking Integrity at sexandhealingrelationship.com that you can use. There hopefully are some maybe in your area, but reach out and talk to some of the other partners and you'll realize, wow, I'm not the only one in this boat, and that can provide some comfort, and you'll learn some tools too. But honestly, it can be common, and it can be difficult. Encourage them to work on their stuff.
Well, and I use the story I'm telling myself. So the story I tell myself when you're pushing me away is that you're going to your avoidant place, like, I mean, starting to label stuff like you talked about with Mr. Rogers. If you can name it, if you can talk about it, you stand a chance of addressing it. The story I'm telling myself when you're, coming in and clinging to me is you're in your anxious mode. What can we do to, what can we do in this moment to change the patterns? A lot of it is just identifying it, changing the pattern, but not taking it personally. It's a challenge, but I find it so helpful. Troy has taught me like abandonment wounds, and like now I'm able to go, oh, my abandonment wound is getting poked. Sometimes I'm not like, oh, it's like, oh my gosh, my abandonment wound is getting poked. But I'm able to identify that. What do I need to do to take care of myself, which is way better than the behavior that would come from that. So, okay, next and last question. If I feel used, is that a sign of being objectified? I have felt crazy for so long. I don't know what really is or what is just my experience anymore. If we don't have sex, he goes and acts out. What does this mean? That's really telling.
Yes, if you feel used, that is probably you being objectified. So trust your gut. And I love that you say you felt crazy for so long. I don't love that you felt crazy for so long. I love that you're recognizing that, because that's you've been tuning into your intuition and then being trained to disregard it. So now we're wanting you to not do that anymore. So it doesn't mean that you are being objectified, but chances are you probably are. And that's when you have a dialogue about it. That's when you talk to the person and say, hey, you know, I'm feeling like you're not seeing me as a whole person right now, and being able to talk about it. When you say, if we don't have sex, he goes and acts out. Well, because that's what addicts do, to be
Active addicts
yeah,
do.
that's what active addicts do, because they still believe that sex is what they need in order to feel better in their life. And sex addiction is not about sex at all, to be honest. It's about the attachment wounds. And so what your partner hasn't learned yet is how to cope with his own pain, and not leaning into it and being able to turn to you and having an open dialogue about that either. So he has some learning to do, and you have learning to do to trust yourself again and be open with yourself. And yeah, if you're feeling used, it's probably because you've been objectified.
Well, this feels to me, and I'm just reading this, but this feels to me like, well, I'm not acting out with, I'm just making this up. I'm not acting out with prostitutes. I'm just looking at porn now. So this is better, but it's still doing the exact same thing. Or I'm not, I'm not acting out with prostitutes, but I'm drinking every night again. Nothing has changed for him. It's just who he's doing it with, and it's you. So that would not feel good to me at all. Then I'm, I mean, again, sex workers, like now you're the unpaid, sex worker. And I don't mean to be cruel or anything, but that's what it would feel like to me, is like, you switched from that to me. So, but okay, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Troy. We will see you in December,
Yeah.
which is right around the corner. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you in the US. And I did mention to somebody called earlier today, the Thursday morning, Natalie is from the Betrayed Partner. She's from Canada, so she's going to be on. Gavin is from Monaco. He will be on. They don't have Thanksgiving, so there really will be groups. But I did put in because somebody asked about Gavin. Yes, Gavin does this Thursday morning men's group. But next week, Wednesday, in this time spot, he's doing the first Wednesday of the month to talk about boundaries, for addicts. What are healthy boundaries for addicts? So join us for that next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.